This is Steve Zeltzer with WorkWeek Radio, and we have a special program that we're having in conjunction with the Mass March and Rally in Ferguson, Missouri, on the issue of racism, on the issue of the attack on working people and youth, not just in Ferguson, but all over the country and in the Bay Area. And our program is called From Ferguson to the Bay Area. So we're going to be talking on this segment about some of the issues facing working people here and the African American community. And joining with me are Sean Gillis. He's works for the fire department, City of Oakland, and is a member of IFPTE Local 21, and has been active fighting privatization in the City of Oakland and how it's affecting working people and youth. Also, Bob Wells, who is a retired teacher of the Oakland Education Association, has been involved in the campaign to defend Mumia and also are defending educational material about Mumia that was put up on a website. And also Craig Gordon, who is was a teacher, just retired, and is still teaching substitute, a member of the Oakland Education Association, who helped develop this material on Mumia for the schools in Oakland. And it came under attack by the police and was taken off the website. And also, as a co-host joining me is George Wright, who is a retired professor, AFT 1493 in Skyline College. So welcome all of you to the show. Well, why don't we first start with what's been happening in Oakland. And Oakland Education Association the union has taken a position against the attack on a website. What's that all about? Craig, do you want to open it up?
Yeah, well, the website is called Urban Dreams. And it was posted, it originated back in the some period between 1999 and 2004 when there was a federal grant to a project in OUSD, Oakland Unified, to produce social justice lessons, curriculum that was produced. It resulted in the production of about 27 lessons and units by various English and history teachers. I was part of that, and I produced a lesson, actually a unit of about 4 days long, called Hidden in Plain Sight, the Radical Vision of Martin Luther King. And it introduced students to the Martin Luther King that is completely whited out of history with I have a dream being the only words that students know. I mean, that's basically all they know, and maybe they know that he, led the Montgomery bus boycott, but other than that, and that he died. But other than that, they have no idea, and this is not just my students, but I think probably still most Americans don't know that Martin Luther King was a fierce opponent of the Vietnam War, and then went beyond that, particularly in the last year of his life, to strongly oppose imperialism, U.S. imperialist policies in support of large corporations around the world, to call for the end of, he was leading a campaign to end poverty with Occupy Washington, basically, and then he was killed before the Poor People's Campaign could be launched. And so he was very critical of capitalism, really, in many ways, particularly his last year. And so this lesson introduce students to that, and the students really have a very positive and response to it, and were really had their eyes open. As an extension of this lesson was also a number of other lessons that make current connections, because if you see that the window in which you're seeing reality through the media and through our textbooks is very narrow, what else might be hidden? And one of them was, as an example for them, was a kind of case study, was Mumia Abu-Jamal, and the fact that none of them, and again, very few people have heard of him. And we could describe, he's a radical former Black Panther who was convicted, framed up for the murder of a police officer in Philadelphia in 1981, and has been on death row, or had been on death row until pretty recently, is still in prison. And there was very little about him. National Public Radio censored all coverage of him, and there was information about that, and asked students to compare it. Maybe the censorship of this to the suppression of Martin Luther King's ideas. So that's it, and it's been used by various parts of that lesson have been used by a lot of different teachers because it's been available on the website. But didn't hear much about it for a long time until recently. Fox News published on the website a story that says, that lesson compares. I can even show you because it's quite sensational. Has a picture of Mumia Abu-Jamal next to Martin Luther King. It says lesson has school kids comparing Martin Luther King to cop killer Mumia Abu-Jamal. The members of the Fraternal Order of Police were quoted, and the officer's widow, also who has been supporting, attacks on Mumia, said this is a disgrace, and it has no place in public education. The district, within at least hours, for all minutes, but on that day that they were contacted for this story, first of all, discredited it, said this does not speak to our current instructional practice, and they took it down. So you can't get to that anymore. So that's basically what happened. I can speak to what we've been saying since then, but they've immediately responded to the attack by the police by just removing it from the website.
And Bob, why don't you want to grab the microphone, and why don't you talk about what has been done to get that website back up, and so the students have the opportunity to read that.
Well, to get it back up, we figured that the responsibility for it lies with the Oakland School Board. We've been going to meetings and asking people to contact the school board to repost it. It's clearly dangerous and unacceptable for a right-wing police political action committee to determine the curriculum of a public school system. And that's what they did by pressuring the Oakland schools to take down the Urban Dreams website. And so what we're doing, among other things, is we're asking people to contact the Oakland School Board and the new superintendent who has come in from Denver, Colorado, urging them to put this back up, because what they would like to do is see the whole thing disappear and just kind of get away with walking away from the responsibility of this website. So we're asking people to email the superintendent. Oh, this is the superintendent's email address. It's superintendent@OUSD.K12.ca.us. And we're asking people to do the same thing to the president of the Oakland School Board, whose name is David Kakishiba. He spells his last name Kakishiba, and his website is david.kakishiba@OUSD.K12.ca.us.
And what has been the response of the unions and labor in regard to this?
The Oakland Teachers Union, the OEA, has passed a resolution calling on the school district to repost the website immediately with no changes. The the Alameda County Central Labor Council has passed a resolution calling on the Oakland School District to put the website back up unchanged. The president of the California Teachers Association has sent a letter to the new superintendent and the president of the board, and so has the president of the National Educational Association, calling on them to put the website back where it belongs, where it never should have been taken down in the first place.
And George, why don't you talk, it seems like Colorado, they're trying to change the history courses to get rid of the real history. Why don't you address that issue of how in education they're trying to basically censor and sanitize the real education of history in the United States? You want to speak?
Yeah, this is a long time story, and in whatever field. I remember when I was an undergraduate taking history classes back in the mid-'60s, early '60s, and there was a mainstream history textbook written by Henry Still Commager, and I forget the other fellow's name, but the only reference to African Americans in this textbook was the first sentence in the chapter on slavery, the Civil War, and that sentence was, "And Sambo was happy during the peculiar institution," okay? That book was published in 1940, Samuel Eliot Morison and Henry Still Commager. During the 50s, gradually, particularly in disciplines like sociology, but certainly by the 60s in other social sciences, and I want to say that history was at the forefront of this. Hofstadter, Kenneth Stamp, the Fonner family, et cetera, Eric Fonner, Philip Fonner, et cetera, with a school that we call revisionist history, where, or another way of calling it is social history, where, as one person once quoted it, it wasn't just the story of old dead white presidents, okay? It was the story of the working class and everybody that created America, et cetera, et cetera. What the history books say is a political reality. I mean, because if you can paint a picture that celebrates the American experience and ignores or doesn't include the egregious aspects of that experience, then you can create an image and socialize people, propagandize people into believing that there's a certain exceptionalism about the United States. So this is ongoing. In fact, I want to add to one of my favorite film directors is a guy named John Sayles, and some of you guys may be familiar with him. But he did a film which I think is one of his best called Lone Star. It was kind of the politics and cultural history of Texas. And it's very diversified, multiracial, multi-class, et cetera, related to the storylines. But there's a discussion in a classroom over the content of a lecture or discussion in this classroom. And the teacher happened to be Mexican-American. There were Mexican-American kids. But then there was a mother who was white. And it got down to the following line. The white mother said, I don't care if you talk about food and dress and music, but when you start talking about who did what to whom, that's where the line is drawn, okay? So none of this is really new at all. What I feel very strongly with, in the last 40 years, with the move towards neoliberalism, et cetera, the content, the narrative, if you will, of reality is very, very important. I remember you guys during the Bush administration, some Bush official said, we don't deal with reality, we create our own reality, et cetera, So this is a fundamental fault line within the maintaining of the status quo in relationship to people having a real understanding. I read an article on Counterpunch within the last 2 days by Gary Leacup about the U.S. and ISIS, and he's commenting on his frustration about the narrative about what's going on in the Middle East right now. And in parentheses, he says every classroom teacher from elementary school up should make it very clear to his or her students that the United States is an imperialist, aggressor nation. But you're not going to hear that in most classrooms. The final point I want to make is this privatization of education process that's underway, whether it was No Child Left Behind or whatever under Bush and now Obama and his hitman, Arnie Duncan. What they want is to standardize curriculum. They want to create online education.
I guess Mumia Abu-Jamal was not in the standardized curriculum.
Yeah.
I've not found him there.
Exactly.
You haven't found Mumia in the standardized Common Core, I guess.
So
it's not enough Common Core.
Right.
Yeah, my point has been made, I think.
Too much to the core.
Okay, well, Craig, why don't you talk about why they're afraid of Mumia Abu-Jamal and why the police groups are organizing, and also the effect of privatization charters in Oakland and how that fits into what's going on in public education in Oakland today.
Well, I guess to start with your last point, I mean, this district, which likes to think of itself, and people in the Bay Area like to think of ourselves as the most progressive, radical, and certainly the members of this board and many in the administration probably would like to think of themselves as that way. But they're really on the forefront of privatization. They've been at the forefront of this neoliberal transformation for the last 15 years at least. When Oakland was put under state control back in 2003, it was it really went into overdrive. And
they shut down schools.
It shut down, and they're continuing to threaten to shut down schools and to look at
give them
shutting down
charters,
more.
private schools.
We have more charters per capita in Oakland than anywhere in California. There's about 40. There's 40 charters currently, and when it comes to teaching, they would of course say we're for teaching social justice. They even I think have endorsed teaching Ferguson, as they say, but not if it gets too close to the core, like you allude to, and. So, when there was a teach-in that, in fact, our union led in 1999 on the death penalty and Mumia Abu-Jamal, initially the district gave some tepid support to it, but when the Fraternal Order of Police, which is behind this latest development, protested and then got traction through a lot of, cooperative journalists, the district immediately tried to ban it. It was also at the time, it coincided with the killing of an Oakland police officer too, so that gave additional fury to the idea, how dare you teach this lesson? So they tried to ban that. So they're afraid of. I just think it's clear that the Fraternal Order of Police is and the right wing is very powerful. So when it comes to real critical thinking and historical, inquiry that the district professes to support, that's really not on their agenda. It's about, raising test scores, about, catering to this very pro-corporate kind of vision of what education is, not questioning what the status quo is. And, what George points out really makes me think of how much of what I taught my students in history was to look at how textbooks changed, even how Columbus was taught look at some textbook examples in the 60s and the 70s and how it started to change when people started speaking out in the aftermath of movements in the 60s and 70s and forced some changes in the textbook. They're still woefully inadequate in terms of addressing, working class struggles and struggles for people of color and so on.
Class struggle mentioned in
There's some mention of the labor movement, but there didn't
is
used to be. But it's
I bet is the word class struggle.
No, class
mentioned.
struggle. They don't call it that.
They don't say class struggle in the United States. It's something else.
Right. Exactly.
It's just conflicts.
Yes.
Yeah, I see.
But all of the whatever progress has been made is it's been through pushing, and now you see the pushback. And so kind of what you brought to my mind is that what we're seeing is in real time the way in which these things change. And so you have a pushback in Colorado. You can't teach anything that encourages dissent. You can't teach
about slavery, and the United States decided to change slavery on its own because the South decided that they just didn't want slavery.
Right.
And that was how it changed.
One of the positive changes is, for example, we on our essay where students are supposed to show evidence to support a position, there's the question, was John Brown a hero, an American hero? Well, at least the students are being asked that, whereas before, and a student asked me recently, Mr. Gordon, why are we discussing this? Why are we spending so much time on this when wasn't as if John Brown was a good guy? Wasn't he a bad guy? He was so violent. I said, it's funny you should say so, because right now we're being told that we shouldn't teach about this other bad guy. This is just after this thing with the Mumia service. And of course, we don't get taught about the larger lesson. The Martin Luther King lesson is about how they don't learn about Martin Luther King. They don't learn about Martin Luther King's, fierce opposition to putting, and he said, that we need a revolution of values where people are more important than profit motive.
Yeah. I'd like to add a footnote to that. What you hear is the I Have a Dream speech, but they never play the April 1967 Riverside Church speech,
Right.
which is where he says what you say.
Yeah, and then continues
about
to
imperialist war.
About imperialist war.
It's interesting in the case
And he
of
caught hell for
Ferguson.
that.
Yeah, he
And-
got shot.
And the militarization,
ultimately.
the murder, the epidemic, continuing epidemic of murders of young black men in the United States. there's no connection to our murders, the United States, U.S. imperialist murders of people all over the world, drones bombing people and children bombing children. I mean, this disaster now in Kobani, where we helped set up ISIS with the Turkish government, where the Turkish government allowed them to organize, to bring troops in there, and actually we're helping them in hospitals, and now they're preventing the Kurds from getting medical treatment and allowing a potential massacre of Kobani. That was the United States policy. That was an imperialist policy against Syria and to wreck Iraq. Now, Bob, you've written about history of the Civil War. You wrote a novel about the Civil War. What are we going through today? Because it seems like the African-American community, the Latino community is under attack. They're the terrorists. You've got to militarize the border. You know, all these people are infiltrating the United States. Is that going on today?
Yeah, let me bring it home to Oakland and the connection with what's happening right now in Ferguson, Missouri. I think, unfortunately, maybe a lot of people still don't know who Mumia Abu-Jamal is and what the Fraternal Order of Police is. Mumia Abu-Jamal was a radio news reporter in Philadelphia in the 70s. He had been a Black Panther. He was elected the president of the Philadelphia Black Journalists Association. He, on his radio program, he constantly exposed the corruption and brutality of the Philadelphia police. They hated him. He got a National First Place News Award from the Columbia University Graduate School of Journalism because of his reporting. And in 1981, when a Philadelphia police officer was killed in what seems to be kind of a parallel of the Frank Serpico case in New York, he was talking to the FBI about corruption. Mumia was shot. He was charged. He was framed with the murder. He was rushed through a court hearing, which one of the leading conservative legal commentators in the country, the legal affairs editor of the National Journal, said, quote unquote, it was grotesquely unfair and clearly unconstitutional. He was sentenced to death, and he just a few years ago got off death row. The Fraternal Order of Police is a national political action committee. People say it's like the National Rifle Association for cops. It's actually much more dangerous than that. And they've had a 32-year vendetta against Mumia. Just on a few of the things they did.
Wasn't the Philadelphia Police Department rife with corruption? And
there were three separate FBI investigations simultaneously in the Philadelphia Police Department, which led to upwards of 40 indictments, way up into the upper ranks of the Philadelphia police. 15 of the cops that were involved in Mumia's arrest went to prison because of corruption.
So they had lied previously.
Oh, absolutely.
And were involved
Yeah.
in graft and corruption themselves.
And the killing of Mumia, or not the killing, the shooting of Mumia, and the framing of Mumia was to cover up that corruption. And now it's to cover up the cover-up of Mumia. Early this year, the Fraternal Order of Police, which has a lot of clout, much more than they deserve, they went to the Senate Judiciary Committee. President Obama had nominated an NAACP lawyer who had had a hand in the appeals for Mumia, one of which actually got him off death row. The Fraternal Order of Police and Fox News went to the Senate Judiciary Committee and said, oh, this is terrible. Here this lawyer was defending a unrepentant cop killer. Mumia never killed anybody. Actually, a career criminal confessed to the crime, which they wouldn't allow into court. So they shot down, they defeated Obama's nomination, and then they turned around and came directly back to the Oakland school system and went after the Urban Dreams website. And what it is, it's an assertion of police control way beyond the boundaries, any proper boundaries that the police are entitled
Well,
to
it
have.
sounds like political intervention.
Political
by
intervention.
the police into the educational affairs that we have. And
Exactly.
I guess they don't want the students to know about Mumia.
No.
You know, and that's and the reason is we expose this corruption and racism in the Oakland Police Department. I mean, it's
And
like
if-
I
yeah.
guess whitewash of the Ferguson Police Department at some point. Let's not talk about racism in the Ferguson Police Department.
I mean, in Ferguson, the cops are saying, hey, get used to it. Eat it. This is the way it is. We're not backing off. We'll burn down your shrines to Michael Brown. They just blew another guy away, and the cop turned around to the crowd and said, hey, that's the way it is. They were,
So you're saying this is an ongoing...
and this is what they're doing in Oakland. Hey, this is it. We're in charge. This is the way it is. Shut up and get used to it. People don't have to, especially in Oakland. They can email both of those email addresses, maybe at the same time they email kpfa.org to make a pledge. They can email the superintendent and the president of the Board of Education and say, repost Urban Dreams with no deletions.
And do you have a website, Craig, where people can get more information on this? And is there a labor action?
They can write to. They could email me basically right now so I can give that address, and if they could send a copy of their any letters that they send, we'd like to know. So if you want more information, you can go to email me at cbgord@aol.com. cbgord@aol.com, and please do email and we'll give those addresses again for the superintendent and the board president, but copy me that communication too. I just want to add quickly that Bob wrote to Mumia about, he corresponds with him about what's happening, and Mumia responded with a letter that mostly focuses on the hypocrisy, the irony of the fact that the police are so indignant, professing such indignation that anybody should compare Martin Luther King to anybody, certainly to Mumia Abu-Jamal, when the history shows that the relationship of the police to the Martin Luther King during his life is anything but reverent, and tremendous harassment and violence.
Sure.
And
Yeah, they told him to commit suicide.
Yep. Well, also joining us on this panel, focusing on Oakland, is Sean Gillis. And one of the issues that we're focusing on is what are the conditions of working class youth who are trying to get an education, who are trying to get training so that they can get good jobs. And Sean Gillis is a worker for the Oakland Fire Department. He's a city employee. And he discovered, part of his job was to train young people in the EMT program at Laney College, and found out that the Oakland Fire Department, some officials had been in collusion with a private company, to privatize the training. And as a result of that, brought that up in the union and against privatization. So young people, particularly African American, would have an opportunity to get training, to get decent jobs. And it was run into all kinds of obstacles to fight the privatization going on with training young people so that they can have good paying jobs. So Sean, thanks for joining us. Why don't you talk about your whole experience and also blew the cover on Oscar Grant and an issue of medical care for him after he was injured. But Sean?
Thank you, Steve. Well, that's going back a few years, and your little intro is bringing back all sorts of really intense events that go back to 2009, 2010. But regarding the outsourcing issue specifically, in 2000, I want to say 2009, summer of 2009, a new division manager was brought into what was at the time known as the EMS division of the Oakland Fire Department. And mid-transition, the program, there was a joint program with the Peralta School District, but specifically Merritt was handling the medical sciences, to mentor, it was kind of a three-pronged program of providing student instructors for the EMT program who would be mentored into kind of a leadership position, providing access to tools and equipment and instructors that wouldn't be otherwise available to the Merritt College students, and then in exchange for hours of training, these mentored instructors that was known as cadets at the time would be given credit towards paramedic school to advance their training and education, and then they would have access to people who would be amenable to be giving them letters of reference in city government and that sort of thing. So it was kind of viewed as a win-win. And then this new medical services division manager undermined that program and separated that program. And since the previous head of that program died and I was involved in that program, a lot of the weight, specifically the directorship, fell on my shoulders, first as interim, and then they appointed me to that. And then, so that was brought up. The relationship was a little bit complicated because this was through the Peralta district, but also I was employed at the city of Oakland. So this manager used his position at the city of Oakland to basically threaten me out of that job. And I looked around and I realized that the right thing to do was step down in that circumstance, because it wouldn't support, the city wasn't going to support the program, the city wasn't going to support the program, and there was nothing.
What does it cost to get training to be an EMT if you go to a private? And this, what company was this?
That's a great thing to mention. So this is through Merritt College. An EMT program would cost at the time whatever 4 or 5 credits cost, as well as your average $150 textbook and workbook. But through a private agency, EMT programs can run as high as several $1,000s, and for a paramedic program, they can cost tens of thousands of dollars. So definitely for people who are interested in becoming getting a job as a paramedic or a firefighter who do not have access to funds, the community college option is the first option that is looked at.
And now that's been destroyed here, and there is no paramedic program through Merritt College anymore.
Well, we're going back a few years. So at 2010, that's what happened. That relationship was destroyed. And then I became, we live in an information society, and I was accidentally forwarded these emails that suggested an alternative relationship between the education arm of the nation's largest ambulance company called American Medical Response, or AMR Inc., and the education arm is called NCTI. So there was a plan for this thing, and they even said in the email, because of the political situation, we should leave the directorship spot blank. And I thought that was interesting because they were forcing me out of a director spot. And so maybe they were saying, we really want this relationship. The relationship is what's important, but politically, it might look a little weird that we just force this guy out. And then we appoint one of you guys who we're going to give money, as trainers or whatever, in this joint relationship. There was mention of a split. It was like a 20-20-20 split or something like that.
And you broke this out. You went public with it, and they tried to fire you. And
Well,
Mayor Kwan was involved in that. You had to fight to keep your job, and there was retaliation for blowing the whistle. Was that?
They did suspend me, and they took more of the day-to-day administrative action that was I would view as the retaliation, the just constantly being undermined, increased workload, being required to work.
They were bullying you. Was it workplace bullying?
Essentially, and so the plot thickens. Under Mayor Kwan. Sometimes one of my favorite lines from some movie somewhere is, if there's a crime, look to see who benefits.
Or follow the money.
Yeah.
I think we've heard that before.
So fast forward to the future, Mayor Kwan is in office, and our union, my union, IFPTE Local 21, supported Mayor Kwan in getting into office. And Mayor Kwan appoints City Administrator Deanna Santana from San Jose and hires Fire Chief Reed from San Jose as well. And a lot of press is given to hiring the first African-American female chief, which is deserved. However, Chief Reed displaces, or somehow the previous division manager working above me, who destroyed this relationship between Merritt College and OFD, he leaves, and so in this vacant spot, Chief Reed hires an ex-battalion chief from San Jose, who most recently came off a career as a private consultant for guess who? The nation's largest ambulance company, flying around the company, or around the country rather, to act as a consultant, to go to governments and talk to city administrators and fire chiefs about how to outsource lucrative functions of government in the fire department. That's primarily training and transport. And this, essentially, I heard from his own mouth. And I had articles to back this up. People would come into my office and say, I hear this guy's your boss. Check it out. Here's this article. And
So he had a whole history of privatizing fire departments
Yes.
throughout the United States, and he's hired by the new chief.
by the new chief
and-
under Mayor Kwan, who is this kind of considered a left-leaning, pro-union mayor that my union supported. And so the reason I'm really focusing on this as kind of setting the stage is because I think that this is a big reason why nobody's looked at this issue at all, is because it all goes in a direction where people don't want to talk about, which is that ultimately they're all being supported by the same cast, right? The union supported Mayor Kwan. It's uncomfortable. And then Mayor Kwan supported this fire chief who put this person in position of power and authority, who proceeded to, in my opinion, misuse that power to basically, he expressed he wanted to outsource training, and he was using, when he first day one sort of stuff, this was in February 2013, and he used this nonprofit model. And so I was, being very circumspect and listening, and then I happened to overhear at the office him talking to executives from the firefighters union, and in that conversation he was not using this nonprofit as a model. He was using NCTI, which is the education arm of AMR, who he used to work for. And it was kind of like knowing a friend has robbed you, but then actually seeing their stuff at your house and feeling vindicated on that level, but still having that,
Well, you brought some of this issue up of outsourcing and privatization, and this is something that not only your union, IFPTE Local 21, but all unions should be fighting. Privatization, it affects here in Oakland.
Wow.
It affected the right of young students, young people to get a training so that they could get a good job. And what was the response? I mean, you brought
So the plot thickens. So I'm going to try and tell two stories really quickly. So in May of 2013, I sent an email to my boss saying, essentially, I'm aware you're doing this. I'm opposed to it. I think you should recuse yourself from any actions that involve this agency or outsourcing, and I want this on record right now. And he considers that a shot across the bow, holds me after work, kind of loses his cool big time, telling me, trying to convince me to not, to change my position. He even says something like, you owe me an apology, which I thought was really interesting and what I thought was pretty clearly coercive. And then he appoints, not known to me, I'm responsible for oversight of medical training at the Oakland Fire Department. He appoints someone who is loyal to him, who also used to be an administrator at AMR, over me, one of our medical training programs. So now I'm a coordinator for this medical training program, or I was to become one, and secretly somebody else has appointed this. And this happens in what I believe to be June of 2013. And then I proceed with my life. And I'm told, I'm given, I'm expectations of what I'm supposed to do. And I conduct this training program that she's the overseer of as if it's my job. And then in in August of 2013, I present a resolution and pass a resolution against outsourcing the H&M section of Local 21. This is after 3 months of trying to get it out there, and I finally, break down enough walls and enough channels to get this presented and passed. So I feel like some traction has happened. But in late August in 2013, the vice president of my section offers to represent me in my professional one-on-one with my boss. I ask a union rep to be there because things have gotten tense around the office. And she turns to my boss at one point during this meeting and says, "You can outsource training as long as you can show that the instructors need shoring up." And I didn't know what to do. I was completely flat. So when I'm in those modes, I kind of go into, like, for lack of a better term, an awareness mode of, like, what's going on here? I need to pay attention. So the meeting concludes, and I make a point to express my concern of what was said with my assigned union rep, and basically say that this is amazingly inappropriate, and I essentially don't know where to go from here. So I'm trying to get back to the other line of my story. Okay, in December of 2013, it comes to my attention that testing, because I'm doing my due diligence to teach one of these classes that I have a ghost supervisor for that I don't know about, that I don't have testing materials that I'm supposed to provide to the candidates who take this training for the fire department, paramedics. And I say, and I go through the educational channels I have available to me, and the instructor trainer who trained us in this program makes me aware that this ghost administrator has been put over me without my knowledge, and that she has the testing materials that have been withheld from me. So I, get very formal and I say, what's going on with this? And a meeting is called, and I'm told that there's been that issues were raised with my instructional techniques, and because of that, somebody else was appointed above me to do my job, but I wasn't told, which is very outrageous and unprecedented. And so again, I kind of get very formal and follow up with this, and I write a letter. At some point, I think I'm flipping those two events around. The meeting was first. Then I find out the instructor materials were withheld from me, and I write a letter, and I feel like I have to get formal at this point, so I write a letter to the overseeing body for this training program. For the training program is called Pre-Hospital Trauma Life Support. So we're talking about teaching medics to save lives about traumatic injuries. Should be important stuff here. And that people may have been trained improperly due to me not having this testing materials that was beyond my control. The state coordinator suspends, the fire chief suspends the program. The state coordinator says they're going to conduct an investigation, an outside investigation. The fire chief says, we're going to bring the investigation in-house, and then guess who is allowed, for the fire administration, guess who is allowed to conduct the initial fact-finding of the investigation? My boss, the one who wants to conduct outsourcing. And these are facts that I can back up. So fast forward to the future, I keep following up. This program has been suspended. What happens when you suspend a kid from school? What happens when you suspend, an activity? You look at what occurred and then figure out what the appropriate follow-up is. So they conduct an investigation. Guess who they investigate? They investigate me. And for the record, possibly a couple of other people. But this is a static thing. This isn't a dynamic thing. This isn't like a train rolling down the train tracks where everything might change based on weather and humidity and time of day. These are pieces of paper and events and that sort of thing. So you'd think that they could conclude the investigation at some period of time. So I keep following up. Well, what was it? What happened regarding the investigation? What steps do we need to take to reinstitute this training program? And I was told in a meeting with the fire chief this July that the investigation was going to be carried on indefinitely. And during that time period, guess what's happened? That training program has been outsourced to, guess who? NCTI through.
So the issue is, why isn't there a fight back by the union against outsourcing, against contracting out? I mean, it's union jobs.
Yeah.
It's affecting the young people who would like to get training. I mean, why isn't there a campaign
Other
against that?
members in the union, at least.
Of course.
If the bureaucracy isn't responding.
So I've brought brought charges, official charges against that. So what happened is I tried to bring this resolution to different chapters because I had sponsors within different chapters. And then in a position that was not supported by the bylaws, it was blocked. And the resolution was brought to the Officers Council. And at the Officers Council, various, the resolution was tabled, undermined.
So in other words, the union officials, the
Disingenu-
leadership did not want to fight outsourcing. And they didn't want to say there should be no outsourcing and we're going to make this a public campaign. We're going to demand that the mayor, Kwan, stop the outsourcing of these public services. That's what it should have been done, shouldn't it?
I would agree with the part about what should have happened. I can't agree specifically on positions that other people have taken.
But I mean,
because
but the union should have spoken up against outsourcing, don't you think?
that's what I feel.
Yeah,
I
and you tried to get that at the
but-
Alameda Labor
but
Council?
The most outrageous thing is that falsehoods were what I believe are falsehoods were represented as facts at the Officers Council, and I wasn't given an opportunity to challenge that. And then so people would say things like, "Well, you've just heard this third hand," or I'd have to check my records for the exact quotes. And then I would try to counter those, and they would essentially say, Sean, you can't talk right now.
But Sean, are any other of your coworkers or members of your union supporting you here? Because I would think that
that's a
you
tricky
should be
thing.
getting that support.
Is that at the
When
office?
they know about it.
My concern is that, so this goes where the beginning of the story is that my concern is that the political allegiances all go to the same place. And that's my impression of how this has gone. I also feel that my credibility has been damaged in that I've been labeled kind of a radical or somebody who, what did I hear secondhand? That I've been called very emotional because I've lost my cool in a couple of these meetings, but based on frustration. So I have brought charges against this individual and this elected official in the union based on this. It's basically a slow motion breakdown. On one side, I can't fight this on my own based on actions that have been taken against me that are not supported by the bylaws. And then on the other side, I've been undermined professionally with the solution to training being this, manufactured emergency. It's almost like the financial collapse of 2007, 2008, which the solution was just in a capitalistic society to bail out these banks that should have failed because that's the role of capitalism. But no, we got to prop up the richest and most affluent with the trillions that we don't have. So
what can people do who want to support your efforts to stop the privatization and have some accountability? Is it an issue in the election campaign, or has Kwan responded to this issue? Has it even been challenged?
Yeah, I don't think a lot of people know about this yet, and through this has taken a great toll on me personally. I've put myself in a position to fight to win, and what that means is I've sold my house. I now live in a SRO on Fruitvale. I pay $600 a month, and I have very little bills, and I have to be ready to not have a job at any time. But I actually have been suspended this week. I'm just coming off a suspension, and based on a tremendous document that has what I believe are many unfounded allegations against me. So. If anybody knows a good labor lawyer, I would really be interested in talking to them. You can reach me. I don't know. Maybe Steve will forward that beyond. But other than that, I think getting the information out would be interesting.
Okay. Well, I want to thank you very much for joining us. And obviously, the issue of outsourcing privatization affects not only the students who should be able to get the training without having to pay thousands of dollars, but also workers who fight privatization and outsourcing themselves are retaliated against, which raises a question of why aren't our unions fighting this outsourcing and privatization in an organized way?
And I want to just add
Why
that
don't you-
what the bigger context of all of this as well is that students, these programs, these private companies have grants and loans that they provide for students at high interest rates, and that students find themselves deeply in debt when they finish these programs. So, they're not the outsourcing and privatization really means these companies are making lots of money, and banks are making money as well.
Yeah, and I wish we need a whistleblower within Oakland Unified School District to be exposing some of the, because there's so much outsourcing going on there too. So these are really related in terms of the privatization and.
Well, I mean, the whole
Of
issue in the
these
Oakland
public
schools of
institutions.
charters, I mean, a massive privatization, 40 charter schools. I mean, it seems like with the Vergara decision, there are all these attacks on teachers, and yet there's no, campaign. There's no organized campaign of public workers, of IFPTE or OEA, I mean, statewide, CFT, against privatization, against charters, against the destruction of public education. And we heard earlier, Normandy High School, which Michael Brown was going at. It was such a poor high school, they didn't even have a gown. They only had one gown, and they had to share the gowns. And,
Is that right?
this is what's going on in the education
Well, and what
system.
Sean brings up about, for reminding you of the bank bailout and the way in which, it's crisis, what do you call it, what Naomi Klein called, shock doctrine. So now, here we are in a crisis, and we have to do this, and you look, Philadelphia in the last 2 days, or in the last few days, the district tore up their contract. They're under state control there, I believe, and they were not only, unlike Oakland, which was bad enough when they imposed a contract on the Oakland teachers in 2010, in Philadelphia, they've taken what, as far as I know, an unprecedented step of canceling their contract. So, and the excuse is we can't afford the health benefits, and what else can we do? So, in Detroit, you see people's water being shut off and saying, sorry, there's no enforceable right to water. So you're right. I mean, what Steve brings up is there needs to be some a coming together of all of these different strands to fight back and to really focus on the fact that this is as he's mentioned, a neoliberal attack, and that working people are being made to pay when banks should be made to pay. The corporations that continue to benefit from this crisis are sitting there continuing to profit greater than ever, while public services are being shut down. Programs like yours are being shut down, and our schools are being squeezed.
Let me get one more plug in here. It's not just the banks that's the problem, it's the cops. The cops are the problem. The cops are on a roll. The cops are aggressive. And the police state is far more advanced than people like to think. So what can listeners do who feel frustrated about what's happening in Ferguson, Missouri? What can listeners do practically now that would have an effect on the police aggression against the Oakland School District? Whatever else people are doing, they can send emails to the superintendent of schools in Oakland and the president of the Oakland School Board. This is a fight that is winnable. The Oakland School Board has already started backpedaling on this question of reposting urban dreams.
I want to thank all of you for this panel, and we've got some concrete information about what's happening, both as far as the suppression of real history for the students of Oakland, and also the outsourcing and destruction of training for young people in Oakland, and also retaliation against employees that actually want to defend these programs for young people and the future of young people in Oakland. So thanks for joining us.